Hello everyone, and welcome to the Prosthetic Product Showcase webinar. We will be starting shortly. I'll give it another minute for the last minute attendees to turn up, and then I will start. Thank you. Thank you. Before we begin, I'd like to point out that all participants are on mute for a better experience so that everyone can hear clearly, hopefully. This webinar is being recorded. It will be made available at a later date for everyone to review. Please use the questions panel on the right-hand side to ask any questions, as we have Bruce online answering any questions today. Handouts are available in the handout panel drop-down box. We have the clinical compendium and the hydraulic ankle white paper, which I'll mention later on. A webinar feedback survey will be sent to you after the session. Please complete this if you need a certificate. I do not see the results, but I get a list of the names of those who actually filled in feedback and then a summary of the results, but it lets me know who wants a certificate or not. Please register for future webinars at blatchford.co.uk/webinars. And if you have any questions following the webinar or at any point, please feel free to contact me, john.ross@blatchford.co.uk. So today we're talking about Understanding Hydraulic Ankles webinar, presented by myself, John Ross, and Lee Boxall, our user. My name is John Ross. I'm Principal Prosthetist and still a practicing prosthetist with Blatchford. I've been prosthetist for 27 years and have a keen interest in biomechanics, transfemoral prosthetics, and the holistic approach to prosthetics. Lee, would you like to give them a bit of a background about yourself?
Sure. My name is Lee Boxall. I became an amputee in 2004 following a motorbike accident, and I've been wearing EchelonVT feet for the last approximately about 10 years. I work on a market in York, in the north of England, and enjoy dog walking as well as helping out the family farm.
Thank you. Okay. So here we have the agenda list. We'll start by discussing the product overview for Blatchford's hydraulic products. Then I will discuss the background of the technology for this product range. I'll then break it down into detailed information about three of our products, the Echelon, EchelonVT, and the Avalon K2. We'll then discuss common questions about hydraulic technology, and I will summarize the information and benefits at the end of the webinar. So the first question is, why use hydraulic ankles? These ankles are anatomically designed to let you navigate a variety of terrain, which lets you stand and walk more naturally. Hydraulics also absorb shock through the socket, similar to the way muscles work, reducing tissue damage, allowing the user to walk more comfortably. The ankle design makes walking possible with less effort, more natural, and reduces the risk of trips and falls. This section discusses the background of technology of hydraulic ankles. Starting off with the amputee benefits. Hydraulic ankle technology has proven to provide a long list of benefits to the end user, including improved comfort, enhanced stability and knee control, improved posture, more even loading between the limbs, more adaptable and efficient gait, natural feeling and proprioception, added toe clearance during swing phase, and less hindrance and better quality of life. And I will mention these all during the course of the presentation, along with the evidence of why we get to claim this. So the 6 reasons why we would want to use a hydraulic ankle. Improved shock absorption at heel strike. It reduces strain on the artificial limb. The viscoelastic nature of combination of hydraulics and spring mimics normal muscle function around the ankle joint, so it gives the patient a more natural gait. With self-alignment, and that the ankle will yield into the position that the patient is walking in. So it will adjust for walking up and down slopes and also for changes in shoes. We have greater adjustment and control for the amputee by using hydraulics. You can also fine-tune the springs for that individual, giving them a greater feeling of control of the limb. We have a biomimetic approach where the ankle, as you can see in the diagram here, sits over where the ankle would be in the patient, okay, and then we have the springs mimicking the function of the foot. And then we've greater positional maintenance because the 9 degrees of hydraulic motion allows us to compensate for changes in gait and also for different terrains that the patient is walking on, as well as contributing to an improved toe clearance and therefore reducing the chance to fall. Most amputees experience musculoskeletal imbalances due to wearing a prosthesis. Okay, they have to accommodate the function of the limb. Okay, so when following the amputation, the socket interface with the patient is a cause of tissue damage because the remaining surface was not originally intended to bear weight. Okay, the stimulus damage will mean that the patient will not want to load that limb as much or use that leg as much as the other leg, so will actually lead to disuse atrophy on the affected limb. Okay. The disuse or reduced function in the remaining limb, okay, that's had the amputation, and the contralateral limb will cause joint pathology, where the patient will be favouring their prosthetic limb and do more work or overuse theory on the sound limb. So what we see is we see greater injury to the sound limb and reduced injury to the joints on the affected limb. Most amputees and nearly all transfemoral amputees will experience back pain at some point during the life of their amputation due to compensating for the lack of function on the prosthetic limb. Amputees also experience an increased energy expenditure. That's well explained by the work from Jacqueline Perry in the Atlas of Prosthetics, looking at how an amputee has to use their muscles for a higher intensity and for a longer duration for each step. And then finally, we see the increased cognitive demand. Amputees having to look about them to make sure it's safe to put their foot down, that there's no trip hazards or obstacles that can get in their way. These pathologies secondary to amputee locomotion are well known. The asymmetrical loading between the limbs is a risk factor. In general, in the healthy population, okay, 20% of people will have osteoarthritis. However, what we see in our amputee population is that there is a reduced chance of having osteoarthritis on the affected limb, while on the sound limb or the contralateral limb, we will see an increased chance of osteoarthritis. This is caused by the additional work that the amputee has to do to compensate for the lack of function in the foot-ankle complex. The increased risk of osteoporosis disease, in which the density and quality of the bone are reduced, is also noted. Okay. Reduced loading of the prosthetic side increases the prevalence of osteopenia and osteoporosis for the amputee. Okay. And we also see disuse atrophy. This is especially noted in long-term transtibial users, where we can see an increased change in the size of the muscles on the affected limb, where we can see overuse and increased bulk on the contralateral limb. Back pain is a common increased risk with lower limb amputees. In the amputee population, 60% of them will complain of experiencing a severe back pain within 2 years of amputation, as reported by Kulkarni in 2005. And Ed also reported that 17% of the amputees will complain that this back pain is the worst pain they've ever experienced, worse than the amputation itself. Okay, And again, this is caused by having to compensate for the lack of function in the prosthetic limb. Cognitive demands, or how much effort you have to put into walking or fulfilling a task, is accepted to be increased in our amputee population. Okay, and this greater cognitive demand for the amputee is due to having to compensate for lack of ankle function in the prosthetic limb, and also having to adapt their walking and standing pattern to make themselves stable and safe for performing tasks. Loss of confidence has been shown to be a risk factor related to falling, and in a survey in 2001 looking at 435 amputees, just over 50% of them reported a fall. Okay. And 20% of these people who fell reported that this caused a serious injury, which actually prevented them from wearing the limb going forward. Rigid feet are not as ground compliant as hydraulic ankle feet. When, as you can see in this case, the patient is standing on a slope facing downhill, a hydraulic ankle will yield so that the foot plantar flex to allow the patient to stand stable. Okay. This means that the user is able to keep the weight on both limbs to an equal degree. The self-aligning technology in hydraulic ankle feet allow the user to have a more balanced limb loading, decreasing the risk for bone disease, back pain, and falls due to decreased cognitive demand. This is on top of reducing shear forces inside the socket, allowing for less trauma or breakdown to the wearer's tissues. Hydraulics and how it works. Okay. The hydraulic foot ankle works in two parts. Okay. We have energy storing in the E-carbon springs and any absorption coming from the hydraulic ankle. The hydraulic ankle feet are designed to be a viscoelastic function, mimicking that of normal joint and muscle function. Okay. And what we can do is we can adjust the hydraulics to decrease the compliance and increase the energy return, or soften the hydraulics to increase the compliance and decrease the energy return. Similar as you would by tensing your muscles to control how the joint functioned and moved for an able-bodied person. Hydraulics are a balancing act, and that the range of motion is not as important as controlled resistance to motion. A massive range of motion but no control will make you unstable. The control of this movement is all important. Okay. And what we can see here is that the hydraulic foot and ankle works as a combination of the hydraulics and the springs. So for example, with the 9 degrees of hydraulic motion and 24 degrees of spring motion, we get a total of 33 degrees of motion, which is equivalent of that of an able-bodied person. So here we see an amputee walking down a hill outside our limb centre. So I live and work in the highest point in London, and then we built the hill. On top of the hill, we dug a hole and built the limb centre. So walking down the hill, first of all, with a fixed ankle. A conventional ankle does not conform to the ground, so we can see the patient's unstable. He's having to compensate for this, dig the heel into the ground, and try and keep himself safe. Then, using the hydraulic ankle, you immediately see the foot plantar flexes. It comes to rest on the floor while allowing greater control of the knee, greater stability, and greater control for the amputee. So this is going to reduce the chances of falling, reduce back pain, and also be less tiring for the amputee. Optimal alignment and stability when standing is one of the most basic needs. There's a case of a doctor who I know who commented that he didn't understand why, but it seemed that every time another doctor or nurse wanted to speak to him, they waited till he was standing on a ramp and then came and stopped him to talk. Controlled hydraulic ankle motion allows natural standing and walking. If the amputee can stand and ambulate stably at the distal ankle joint, then their more proximal compensatory muscles will fire less often, equaling less effort and less fatigue. And as I mentioned before, from the work of Jacqueline Perry, it's the extra work done by the proximal muscles that causes the increased effort for the amputees. Most importantly, when you look at Richard on these pictures here, foot to ground compliance is achieved in both of these images, allowing him to stand safe and stable. We mimic the functions of the foot by using E-carbon springs. The Echelon uses these springs to balance the hydraulic motion with the toe motion and deflection of the springs to mimic the human foot and ankle. These springs have been in use since 2005 and are part of a modular system, allowing us to bolt ankle joints on above the foot module to mimic that of normal human foot. As I mentioned at the beginning, we're going to discuss 3 feet from the hydraulic line today, starting with the world's first hydraulic ankle foot, the Echelon. The unique design of the Echelon foot is comprised of a dynamic, independent E-carbon heel spring that provides shock absorption and forward progression. The tripod design of E-carbon springs provides excellent mediolateral compliance while adapting and conforming to all terrain and maximizing energy return. When we were actually developing this series of feet, what we found is that because our heel and toe are not connected, there was no need to split the heel section. So actually in ours, we have a solid heel, much like the calcaneus, the human foot, and then we have a medial and lateral arch formed by the 2 toe springs. And these E-carbon tripod springs are paired with hydraulics, which allows to determine how much energy goes into the carbon springs, which determines how much energy is given back to the user and allows us to fine tune the carbon fiber springs for the individual for normal walking. When ordering the Echelon foot, the user weight is critical, okay, in order to get the correct spring category for the patient. There are 8 categories of spring based on the patient's weight. From my personal experience for transtibials, if someone's at the upper end of a weight limit, I suggest going to the next spring category up. Okay, so if someone is within a kilogram of the next category of springs, certainly I would think of moving up because I can adjust for that additional stiffness by using hydraulics. Additionally, our feet shell come in different widths. Okay, so we have a standard foot, narrow foot shell width and a wide foot shell width over the most common ranges, so it makes it easier to fit the patient's shoes. A large amount of scientific evidence has been done on the hydraulic technology, specifically in the Echelon over the last few years. And I'm going to discuss some of this evidence in detail. The hydraulic ankle white paper, which you can collect from the handout section, is a sample of the ankle white papers that we supply on the Blatchford's website. It's a great resource to give to your amputees and referral sources because it's a mix of scientific speech and plain languages, making it easy to read and understand. Additionally, we have a clinical compendium of evidence on our hydraulic ankle feet. This includes 23 peer-reviewed journal publications which describe each of the clinical benefits claimed by Blatchford's on behalf of the hydraulic ankle technology. Okay, and the independent research that has come out to actually show how we managed to get to make these claims. It can also be accessed on the Blatchford's website. It should be noted, however, that Alan Diasha, who has published many papers over the years on the benefits of hydraulic ankles, has also stated in O&P Edge that because one hydraulic ankle gives you these benefits, it is not necessarily true that all hydraulic ankles will. Because the pivot positions on the hydraulic ankles are changed, the range of hydraulic ankle motion and the carbon fiber springs are all different from different manufacturers. What has been proven on behalf of the Blatchford's hydraulic ankles is not necessarily true for all the competition. So moving on to the clinical benefits. The first is balanced limb loading when wearing a hydraulic ankle foot. This was one of the first evidence that was shown and has now been repeated several times from different authors. And it shows the greater involvement of the prosthetic side, which results in reduced risk of joint disease in the sound limb and osteoporosis in the residual limb. The image shows the reduction in asymmetry of interlimb loading when standing on a slope with a hydraulic ankle on the right compared to the fixed ankle on the left. And what we can see is that the blue and red arrow are much more even, and this has been reported by multiple researchers. Next is the greater comfort when wearing a hydraulic ankle. One study showed an 81% reduction in peak residual pressure and an 87% reduction in loading rates compared to other energy storing and return feet. The outcome is improved socket comfort and less risk of skin and tissue damage, which will greatly benefit the amputee. Improved energy efficiency is another proven clinical benefit. Studies found a reduced metabolic cost of walking with an 11.8% reduction on the level ground and 22.2% in slopes. Okay. And it is generally acknowledged that the faster someone walks, the more energy efficient they're doing. The next benefit is greater control and stability. Studies have shown a 7% increase in walking speed with the same effort when using a hydraulic ankle foot versus a rigid foot. Okay. So when we compare a hydraulic ankle from Blatchford and we compare it either to a similar fixed ankle or a competitor's energy storing foot, what we see is an increased walking speed. And here in the diagram here, you can actually see a photograph of Lee walking his dog, and I'll come back to Lee in a minute. Improved safety is an outcome that all prosthetists and amputees want to achieve. Okay. It is always one of the first things that amputee asks for is improved safety. Scientific evidence has shown there's an 18% increase in the minimum toe clearance compared to rigid feet when using a hydraulic ankle. This improved limb clearance is achieved through the hydraulic foot remaining dorsiflex throughout swing phase, similar to the human ankle, reducing the risks of trips and falls. The last and most important clinical benefit is patient satisfaction. This has been shown in two separate studies from two groups of researchers using the patient evaluation questionnaire, and we've seen that if a patient is not happy with the product, they will choose something else. Repeated scientific evidence has shown an improved perception of limb performance and an overall greater well-being as a prosthetic user when wearing a hydraulic ankle foot. This is the scientific evidence that is being gathered and collated to show that a hydraulic ankle Echelon foot will benefit the user. But what I would like to do is actually get this from Lee and ask him how this all actually affects him in real life.
Yeah, sure. Well, like I've said, I normally work on a market stall, and my day is normally 10 to 12 hours long, so I can be standing pretty much in one position on a slope for that length of time. I have to build the stall and dismantle it every day, and I can do this pretty much, well, to be honest, without even considering what foot I'm wearing. And I stand up no less than anyone else who actually works on the market. I can go about my normal daily life without looking down all the time, which is a real benefit for an amputee. When I wore fixed ankles, I would often get tired because I'd be constantly watching the terrain, knowing that if I hit a stone, then the forces would inevitably hit my stump, and I'd often get rubs and tears to the tissue. With a Echelon or the hydraulic angles, what I initially thought would slow me down is it actually speeds me up. It's just so easy to use and wear. So a massive difference. Like I said, the biggest thing for me is I don't tear the tissue on my stump. I don't really suffer from any more back pain than anyone else would ever do. It's not really an issue in my life. And as has been said, I've been an amputee now since 2004, so quite a long time. But the real thing for me is the consideration of how I would actually be if I'd stayed on a fixed ankle for the last 10 years that I've been wearing the hydraulic ones. So I feel remarkably grateful to have been able to wear them. Other things that I find, I can sit in a normal position, I can get out of a chair easier. My feet aren't in the way if people have to pass in front of an aisle of chairs. It really is one of those things where I just get on with my life day to day, and I don't consider really what I'm doing any different than anyone else, which is just brilliant as an amputee. So yeah, easy to climb and go up and down stairs. I have a really natural gait. I can work on the market for several years before any new starters on the market actually realise that I'm actually an amputee. And then they usually march up and go, I would never have known. But it's just reassuring, and actually my life is no different than anyone else's. So yeah, I've got nothing but praise, and just very grateful that I've been able to wear these feet for the last 10 years.
Thank you. Okay. So moving on to the fitting recommendations. The Echelon foot is intended for K3 users and someone who wants a smooth walking everyday foot. Someone who frequently has to walk over uneven terrain. Okay. It's not intended for indoor users. And someone who complains of socket pressures, as has been shown in studies. Lee actually has his bone spur on the end of his residual limb, so this actually helps us with that. Contraindications for the Echelon foot, are patients who weigh more than 125 kilograms. Activity level K1 or K2, this foot is not really intended for them. And amputees who want to participate in sports or high impact activities and only receive one prosthesis. We do have patients though who are involved in high level impact sports and use this as a day-to-day limb, but only when they have a dedicated limb for their sports. And in that case, what they're doing is they're wearing the Echelon and the EchelonVT, which I'll come to next, to protect the residual limb, to keep them healthy and safe for competing. An alignment wedge can be ordered for free with each Blatchford hydraulic ankle foot. Okay. Using the wedge during bench alignment is critical to achieving optimal alignment and distribution of plantar flexion and dorsiflexion. Okay. Blatchford's ankle feet get 6 degrees of plantar flexion. The wedge, surprisingly enough, is at 6 degrees. So all you do is you put the foot inside the patient's shoe, stand the leg up such that the load line passes through the cross section on the side of the foot. Okay, and by fully plantar flexing the ankle, this wedge eliminates the guesswork of trying to find the neutral. Alignment is an important part to proper function of that Echelon in order to take advantage of the full posterior to anterior pivot point, 9 degrees of hydraulic motion. Once the ankle is neutral using the wedge, it is recommended to align 0 to 10 millimeters posterior to the alignment reference point on the body hydraulic unit. Okay, and that's why these crosshairs are there. So just shift it back slightly so that the weight line's passing a third of the way along the length of the foot. When the patient dons the prosthesis and stands up, this is one of the key points to see if you've got the alignment correct. When aligned properly in the static alignment, the user should be able to stand with minimal muscle control in a vertical position, as in the central diagram. Correct AP placement of the foot is critical to achieve this. As seen in the picture, if the AP shift is too far forward, the user will lean in the plantar stop and the foot to slid backwards, i.e. the patient will be feeling as though they're falling back. Alternatively, if the foot is far too posterior, the patient will lean into the dorsiflexion stop and feel as though they're wanting to fall forward. Okay, so we need to adjust the foot by sliding it backwards and forwards until the patient feels they can stand stably and comfortably. Once the optimum static alignment has been achieved, it's time for the patient to walk with the Echelon. Observe their gait while giving them time to acclimatise the foot. Ask for feedback from the patient. Pay attention to the heel strike and rollover pattern. Independent adjustment for the plantar flexion and dorsiflexion can be manipulated using a 4 millimeter Allen key, Allen wrench, whatever you call it. We suggest adjusting the plantar flexion or heel stiffness first before dorsiflexion. When you adjust the plantar flexion, you're adjusting how fast the foot goes to foot flat. And when you adjust dorsiflexion, you're adjusting how quickly the prosthesis progresses over the foot or the tibial progression. If the heel is too soft, a patient may feel of a sinking sensation or having difficulty getting over the foot until complain of a dead spot. If the dorsiflexion is too high, the wearer may feel that they're climbing up a hill. Okay, and if it is too low, they may feel that they fall off the edge of the foot. The next foot in the hydraulic line we'll discuss is the EchelonVT. This is the foot that Lee is currently wearing. Okay. So the EchelonVT combines the well-known Echelon hydraulic ankle foot technology with a vector thrust. The vector thrust unit allows the added benefits of rotational and axial compliance to the user. The foot is greater for your patients who want to participate in outdoor activities such as hiking or golfing, and also for patients who have a history of residual limb pain in their sockets, as we discussed in Lee's case. So the EchelonVT gives you plus or minus 15 degrees of rotation movement on each side of neutral, allowing for a total of 30 degrees for the amputee. Typically when walking, we set it so that the spring will give you 4 to 5 millimeters of axial compression out of a maximal 10 millimeters, so that if the patient has to jump off a small fence or over something, they have that additional shock absorption there. Again, as with the Echelon, it is most important you get the weight right when ordering the foot. The correct user weight is essential to make sure you receive the proper axial spring inside the VT unit. Unfortunately, these cannot be changed locally. Now let's discuss the scientific excellence for the EchelonVT. In addition to the already mentioned Echelon benefits, the EchelonVT includes these additional features: torsional and axial compliance, reduced back pain, particularly at fast walking speeds, a reduced loading rate on the residual limb, which will lead to greater comfort, and enhanced stability and knee control for transfemoral users. Lee, now you currently wear an EchelonVT. Could you explain why you prefer the EchelonVT to the standard Echelon?
Yeah, absolutely. As I've said, my working life is fairly high impact, and again, I walk across uneven terrain all day. York is very cobbled, uneven medieval city, so every time you put your foot down, you don't want to look down to see if you're hitting a stone or anything. Again, with the advantage of the VT for me is the foot will actually move around torsionally as well, so I can stand on the stall, I can talk to somebody to the left or right without constantly moving my foot position. When the weather is warmer, if I perspire, the movement that I have in my socket, I don't move inside my socket as much because I can move around the pivot point on the foot. There's a load of benefits. When I set up my stall, I have to climb onto the stall to put the lighting up. I then jump onto the ground. Each time I do this, the VT element will take out some of the stresses which would have impacted on the end of my bone growth, what John mentioned. So yeah, the benefits are brilliant. I can walk the dog up and down whatever hill in the Lake District or anywhere that I like, and come home no tighter than my partner. So the benefits for me is that I can just be as active. I feel I can be as active as I was when I had a fixed blade foot, but still have a smooth walking gait, and just get home without feeling absolutely exhausted. I feel absolutely fine at the end of the day. So yeah, lots of benefits to the VT, and again, obviously everything that the Echelon has as well in terms of conforming to the ground.
Thank you. I should point out that I have a vested interest in the VT unit, and that previously I have published and presented at international conferences the benefits of vertical compliance and axial rotational control gives to our amputees. The actual shortening that we get on here does prevent the body center of gravity having to increase and decrease so far, so it actually saves the energy from the patient having to climb over the leg because the limb gets slightly shorter during stance phase, similar to able-bodied people where we actually allow some flexion of our joints to do this, and the rotational control actually makes it easier for people to work in small and tight spaces. But we're going to move on. We will now discuss the fitting recommendations for the EchelonVT. This follows on from the Echelon recommendations. So indications, activity level K3, golfers and hikers, especially patients who want to do outdoor activities, it's an ideal foot for, and again, patients with socket pain. Contraindications for this foot would be, again, somebody who's over 125 kilograms. Activity level K1 or K2 patients, or patients with poor balance. A further contraindication for the EchelonVT, however, is if you have a patient who needs a waterproof foot. The EchelonVT is not waterproof. So unlike the Echelon foot, which is waterproof, this one you cannot immerse in water. Fitting instructions, just like the Echelon, the alignment of the EchelonVT is vital in order to take advantage of the hydraulic range. Once the neutral ankle position is found, again, just use that wedge, okay? So set up on the wedge, and then build line should fall 0 to 10 millimeters posterior to the anterior pivot point. As you can see in the images on the right, there's independent adjustment for plantar flexion and dorsiflexion at the rear of the foot. Our final foot is the Avalon K2. The Avalon K2 is a hydraulic ankle specifically designed for the complex needs of the lower mobility amputee. The K2 amputee is probably the most common patient that we'll see in our clinics around the world. Okay, and this foot uses a resilient keel with a hydraulic ankle to maximize the potential of this group of amputees. So, the lower mobility amputee, what we're doing is we're looking to, this group of amputees has an increased likelihood of falling. They have poor vascular health, okay, which can lead to problems with the tissue in the residual limb. With back pain and osteoarthritis, and that these lower mobility amputees also typically have at least one other comorbidity that is of a greater problem to them than actually amputation. As I mentioned before, 60% of all amputees state fall or fear of fall affecting their daily lives. So when we start looking at the biomechanics of elderly gait, it's well documented that there are a number of differences between the gait of elderly people and that of young people. Older people tend to walk more slowly, contributing to a shorter step and stride length. Lower limb muscle weakness is common amongst elderly people, and therefore the power generated by the ankle in late stance is significantly reduced. So of all these differences, influence the motion of the body's centre of mass in relationship to its base of support and must be considered during the prosthetic foot design. The Avalon was designed with a K2 less active user in mind. With its shorter keel in comparison to our other hydraulic feet, and the ease of design for rollover, coupled with the extra 3 degrees of dorsiflexion to again increase ground clearance, this is made to make the less active amputee as mobile and increase their potential as much as possible. The shorter keel and change rollover design is made to actually make it easier for the patient to walk over the length of the foot. The hydraulic ankle technology controls the plantar flexion and dorsiflexion and was aimed at giving all the benefits that had been made available for the Echelon user to this group of less active patients. Okay. And the entire package with the increased range of hydraulic motion in this was to enhance the confidence, independence and safety of the user. There is no spring category because we have no carbon composite springs in this foot. So there is just a case of matching the foot size with that of the amputee. It should also be noted the weight limit of the Avalon K2 is 150 kilograms, okay, because we have a growing number of increased weight amputees in this low activity user group. Next, we will discuss the scientific evidence based around the design and function of the Avalon K2 hydraulic ankle foot. Why is this increased range of motion important? A simple task such as sit to stand can be difficult. However, the keel shape and the additional 3 degrees of dorsiflexion range allows the base of support to move closer to the body's centre of mass, making it easier to sit to stand. I'm sure many of us who have been working in clinic at some point or other have saw a less active patient trying to get up from a chair, and because they haven't been able to pull the foot close enough to their body, it makes it difficult for them to rise from the chair in the clinic. Placing the base of support in a more posterior position reduces the hip moment. Okay, so by allowing the foot to dorsiflex and pulling it closer to the chair or partly under the chair makes it easier for the amputee to stand up. The additional 3 degrees of dorsiflexion again maximizes the toe lift for the patient. Okay, this minimizes the risk of trips and falls, and this is of paramount importance to the lower level K2 ambulators. With the hydraulic ankle foot technology, the foot remains in a dorsiflex position during the swing phase, leading to increased ground clearance. And research has shown that in a hydraulic ankle, toe clearance during swing phase is increased by 18% compared to a rigid ankle. Okay. This increased toe clearance results in less chance of catching the foot in the ground and hence reduced number of trips or falls occurring for the amputee. Barnett et al. Showed that looking at 5 K2 amputees with a validated 2-minute walk test using a navigator foot, which uses the same keel as the Avalon K2, then when using the Avalon K2 feet, that we had an increase in walking speed. Okay, the reason they compared the navigator to the Avalon K2 is that they both used the same keel, and the only thing that changed was the ankle. All amputees in the study walked further with the Avalon K2 over the period of 2 minutes, and a mean walking speed increased of 6.5% for the group of K2 amputees in our study. Typically among amputees, stance phase duration is longer on the sound side for multiple reasons. Tissue pain, damage to the residual limb, favouring the sound limb are all common examples and reasons for this. Another study done sought to measure the impact of the Avalon K2 compared to non-hydraulic designs with regard to balanced limb loading of K2 amputees. Typically, amongst the amputees, stance phase duration is longer on the sound side because the residual limb may be painful to loads, and they may have a lack of prosthesis control, or there may be a lack of stability provided by the prosthesis. However, when using the Avalon K2 for this group of amputees, we saw a 34% reduction in asymmetry for this group of amputees. When fitting the Avalon K2, first of all, the indications. The We do not have carbon composite springs, so it is aimed at the activity level K2, limited community ambulators and patients with compromised tissues. The foot is waterproof, okay, so if you have a patient who for whatever reason has to get the foot wet, submerged in water, that is not a problem. Contraindications is not recommended for activity level 3 and 4 patients, okay. The keel and the cushion heeled is designed for the K2 user. It is not suitable for users with poor balance, and again is not suitable for patients over 150 kilograms. This is different from the Echelon and EchelonVT, which are only rated to 125 kilograms. Just like the Echelon and EchelonVT, the alignment of the K2, Avalon K2 is critical to proper function. Okay. The hydraulic ankle and the Avalon gives you 6 degrees of plantar flexion and 6 degrees of dorsiflexion, but we use the same wedge as we use on the Echelon. So we put the patient's foot inside the shoe, put it on the wedge, and then push the foot into maximum plantar flexion. Once the foot is in a neutral position in the wedge, make sure the alignment line falls just posterior to the anterior pivot point, okay, as before. And please note, in the case of the Avalon, there's a single adjustment for plantar flexion and dorsiflexion. So the Avalon K2 uses a 2.5 millimeter Allen key, and it is choosing a single adjustment point for the rollover. Okay, we're going to move on to questions. Here we go. Okay, so first question, are hydraulic ankle feet for me? Yes, Blatchford's hydraulic feet are designed to meet all types of amputee needs, from K2 to the very active K3. Okay, so ranging from someone doing a bit of gardening on the end here, so that's actually in Crystal Palace Park, through to the everyday user who's having to walk up and down different terrains, and then onto the likes of Lee running. What other hydraulic feet does Blatchford have? We also have the Echelon vac. This is an Echelon foot with an elevated vacuum system built onto it. This will be included in a further webinar at a later date. And we have the Elan, which is a microprocessor controlled hydraulic ankle. Okay. So the Elan was the world's first microprocessed controlled hydraulic ankle, which mimics the natural muscle resistance and ankle motion by allowing us to change the plantar flexion and dorsiflexion characteristics of the foot and ankle in real time for the user. Okay, so this allows us to optimize the stability when standing and walking on slopes and even terrain to a greater extent than can be done with the mechanical versions we've spoke about today. In summary, I would like to again review the many benefits the clinical outcome hydraulic ankle technology can provide. The first of which is the improved safety does so by reducing the risk of trips and falls with an 18% increase in toe clearance, reducing the chance of the patient catching the toe or having to look at the ground or walking. The second is improved balance and stability. When facing down a hill, for example, the foot will yield into a plantar flex position, allowing the patient to stand with their knee extended in a comfortable position. The third is greater comfort, and this theory is based on the reduced socket pressures because the foot and ankle will compensate for changing terrain. The amputee doesn't have to compensate themselves. They can actually let the limb do it for them. The fourth is balanced limb loading for reduced long-term limb disease in both the involved limb as well as the sound limb. All the feats have been shown to increase the patient's ability to share their weight evenly between the affected limb and the contralateral limb. The fifth is improved energy efficiency. Okay, and what we see is no matter which of the feet are used for their amputee group, we will see that there is an energy cost saving when walking on the flats. We will see an energy cost increase, an energy cost saving when walking on slopes, which is even greater because of the adaptability of the ankle. And we will see a faster self-selected walking speed by the group of amputees. Okay. The sixth and final is greater satisfaction. Okay, and in one study we saw that the increase in satisfaction was increased by as much as 33.4% for bilateral patients when using a hydraulic ankle as opposed to using a fixed ankle. If you go to our website, you will find our offerings and support. First of all, the website will give you a greater degree of information than has been made available today. Ordering detail as well as some live stories from amputees telling it. We have the clinical compendium, which is a summary of independently verified research that has been published around the world showing that the claimed benefits of the Echelon, EchelonVT and Avalon are actually measurable by researchers and clinicians in the field. And then we have the white papers, which are short articles which actually just take the information from the clinical compendium, and instead of you having to read about 23 separate different research papers, it just brings it down into one succinct message giving you the overall benefits as an example. Finally, I'd like to thank you for your time today in attending our webinar. Thank you on behalf of myself, John Ross, and our user, Lee Boxall. Please don't forget to complete the feedback and the follow-up emails. Please register for our next webinar at blatchford.co.uk/webinars. More resources for the professionals can be found at blatchford.co.uk/prosthetics/professionals. Or should you need further information, again, please feel free to email me at john.ross@blatchford.co.uk, as we mentioned at the beginning. Finally, thank you. Please give us your feedback, especially if there's any additional courses you would like us to run in the future. And I would like to thank you for your time and patience. Thank you.